Hey, it's Skark 11, and Tears of the Kingdom had some great dungeons, but I'm sure most people can agree it needed more dungeons, less shrines. So today I'm going to go over 4 locations that could have been used for additional optional dungeons, which would have given some areas more story relevance and more meaningful things to do. So the first of these is Eventide Island. So there's already 2 kind of related quests. I'm not sure if one is actually required to do the other, since I did the Eventide Island part of the quest first before going to Lurelin Village, but what it could be for this being a dungeon is you have the usual situation in Lurelin Village with the pirates. You have to clear out the pirates from Lurelin Village. Maybe add a little to that besides just taking them out. Maybe you could add some puzzles to finding them in Lurelin Village, but not necessary. But after that, then you go to Eventide Island, where the entire island has been turned into a pirate fortress instead of just 2 small areas of it. The whole island is a pirate fortress. You have to go around, solve a few puzzles throughout the island, and each one will lead you to where the pirate ship is docked. Once you've done everything on the island, you go and unlock the pirate ship base inside the big rock, Koholit Rock. You go in there, you have some more puzzles to solve instead of just going into the docks, and then you will fight a Pirate King Bokoblin instead of a regular boss Bokoblin. I'm basing that off of the fact that most of the regular dungeon bosses are already just bigger versions of existing enemies, so most of these ideas for the dungeon bosses of these extra dungeons could have just been bigger versions of other existing enemies. So it could have been a Pirate King boss Bokoblin. Just be a bigger boss Bokoblin that's wearing a pirate hat, because everyone would have loved to see that. For the next dungeon location, I actually talked about this briefly in a recent video, just talking about how much I love the Akkala region, but Akkala Citadel. This is the perfect location for having a dungeon inside of it. It's already a massive fortress. We know from Age of Calamity what the inside looks generally, so they could have used that as a base and added a lot more to it to have a very large climbing dungeon that you have to get through. It could have been taken over by monsters, and the boss could be a Gleeok, a special version of Gleeok instead of just a generic Gleeok. So you have to go through, starting from the bottom, work your way up all the way through the dungeon, clearing out monsters, clearing out rubble, disabling their traps that they've set, and then you finally get to the top and you have to fight off the unique Gleeok, because we could have used something more than just the 3 generic Gleeoks and then the King Gleeok that just combines the attacks of the other 3, but their attacks are pretty much all the same. There's only like 1 actual attack difference between them, and it's basically used the same anyway. So they're basically all just the same kind of Gleeok, even though there's 4 different types. All the fights just go the same. So could have been nice to have a more unique version of a Gleeok that you fight as a boss at the top of Akkala Citadel. And this is just the perfect location for a dungeon. Look at the size of this thing. We know that there's lots of winding hallways and traps that you could set inside of a place like this. And then once you clear it, it could be used as a new settlement area to have shops and stuff. Since you'd be clearing it of monsters that have taken over, there's already plenty of monster den clearing quests, so it would have made sense to have a whole dungeon about monster clearing so that people could use this again. The next location for dungeon, Satori Mountain. So Satori Mountain, really big place. It's already got 2 caves inside of it, which already makes for a good location to put a dungeon inside. You could have something where you start off the Sandin Park ruins, you have to solve a puzzle there, that opens up the dungeon inside of Satori Mountain. The entrance could be at the peak, so then you have to climb the whole mountain all the way up, dealing with things on the way up. Then at the peak, you go into the dungeon itself. I don't really have any ideas for what kind of stuff could be inside the dungeon, other than I would really like to see a whole Sakura-themed dungeon inside of Satori Mountain that's all about the Satori. Behind the cherry tree up here would be just the perfect location for having a dungeon entrance. And as for the purpose of this dungeon, why you would be visiting it, I have a few ideas for that. One, it could just be a gloom thing where the Satori needs your help clearing the mountain of gloom. It could be that the Satori is testing you and you get some kind of reward at the end, and you have the Satori as a boss fight. Personally, that would be my favorite usage for it, is having the Satori test you and then you get to fight the Satori as a boss. Or just some basic exploration, thanks to Colton having you go up here and wanting to explore Satori Mountain. And that could be as part of his whole quest line with giving him the bubble gems. But yeah, I generally just would really like a whole dungeon that's Sakura themed, filled with bubble frogs, blue peas, and the Satori. Plus, this has always just been one of my favorite areas in Hyrule. And for the last location, this could have actually been part of the main story instead of completely optional. Since it already relates to something in the main story, it's just the actual stuff here is basically irrelevant. And that is the Great Deku Tree. So we already come here, not really much happens here. There's just a single room with a boss fight, that's it. So we could expand that. We could have, instead of just a single room with a boss fight, have a whole dungeon in the depths underneath the Deku Tree. Have a whole interior of the Deku Tree roots in the depths, ending with a more unique Phantom Ganon boss fight instead of just a regular Phantom Ganon boss fight. Because this was probably the most disappointing part of the game when I got here. Thought there was going to be a whole quest line related to this. And it's just one room. One room with boss fight, that's it. You can see there really needed to be more here. So yeah, this could have been a full dungeon that could take up, instead of just this one little spot, could take up this whole ring of the underground here. Comparing it to the size of the other dungeons, that would have been just about the perfect size to have it extended out like this far and have some verticality to it where you have to go deeper and deeper down until you finally reach where the boss is, and then you finally clear it. So this one's just more expanding on something that already exists. Kind of disappointing that it didn't exist. It would have been the perfect place to have another story dungeon. And I've also got one more that's not an actual dungeon idea. I mean, it could be, but this is more so just a minor thing. So instead of a full dungeon, could have just been inside a cave system, a large cave system underneath Floria Falls. We've already got a bunch of caves, but instead of just a bunch of disconnected caves, it could have been one large connected cave system with remains of the ancient cistern inside. Come on, who wished that there was some remains of the ancient cistern inside of Floria Falls here? We got a bunch of caves, but there is no ancient cistern that I'm aware of. I explored every single cave. You can see I filled them all out. I didn't see anything in there that could have been related to the ancient cistern, unless I missed it, but that really should have been in there. We needed that reference. Could have even connected to the depths. Could have had a chasm in there. To the bottom part of the ancient cistern. I mean, that was already the exact same aesthetic as the depths. And then the last thing I want to mention is the shrines. Since this would be adding 4 additional dungeons, that would mean 4 more heart containers. And that would mean you don't need as many shrines, but I would like to go further than that and change it from every 4 shrines gives you an upgrade to every 3. This means we could reduce the number of shrines down from 152 to 105 and then have an additional heart. So I just would have preferred a lot less shrines. The shrines get really tedious, especially since they're so short. If you reduce the number of shrines, you could keep all the same puzzles, but just combine them into longer shrines. That way they're more proper mini-dungeons instead of just really simple puzzles. There's only a few of them that I can think of that actually had longer puzzles that qualified as being like a mini-dungeon. Yeah, those are my ideas for additional dungeons that could have been in Tears of the Kingdom. Do you have any locations that you think would have worked for dungeons besides the additional one that I mentioned of the Ancient Cistern as a cave system? If you have any ideas for where dungeons could have been, then leave that in the comments. And if you watch the end, comment Blossom Dance down below to let me know. Actually, if you're commenting your own ideas, you probably already watched the end anyway. So, see you next time.